back to the podcast. It's Andrea Growell. I am so glad that you joined me. Today, you are going to hear from Megan Anthony. She is an amazing school communicator who actually runs social media for 5 different schools, basically an agency and 4 schools. So you're going to want to lean in. She's got some great tips. We're going to talk about kind of her struggle through anxiety, which I definitely can relate to. We're going to talk a lot about social media tips. And then she led her district, one of her districts, through a rebranding process. She terms the word, we could play logo whack-a-mole, like whack-a-logo. I think that's what she said, whack-a-logo. Like, who can relate to that? Totally, I can. And so you're going to love this interview with Megan. Before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to J Casper 25. I've been doing this social media podcast, Mastering Social Media for Schools, for a year now. It's amazing. It was a COVID project. I'm a year in, and I think this is episode 55, you guys. This is amazing. I love it. But I love this review that I just recently got. J Casper 25 said, "This is now the podcast I have to play as soon as a new episode drops. Every episode gives me 1 or 2 concrete ideas, actions, thoughts that I can use to improve as a school communicator. Andrea is a wonderful, genuine host, and the variety of guests is impressive and indicative of the unique talents that school communicators have. Thank you for being a great resource for a relative newcomer like me." Awesome. I appreciate that review. If you love this podcast, make sure you subscribe because we drop a new episode every Monday. And we always want to give those great tips. Also, you can leave a review. Obviously, on Apple, as the Apple podcast is the best place to leave a review. And with that, let's get into today's interview. Today's K-12 PR tip is straight from our interview with Megan. She gives a great piece of advice really about how to manage social media instead of letting social media manage you. So when I first started with social media, I was checking my phone absolutely all the time. All the time. Throughout the day, I was just always looking at what came in for comments. You just didn't want to miss something. And this is a really good piece of advice straight from Megan. She's like, I check comments and the pages at specific times throughout the day so that it doesn't consume my entire day. So maybe you jump in right when you wake up, and then maybe it's a 10 o'clock little alarm on your phone says, okay, it's time to check comments again. Maybe it's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and maybe another time in the evening that you're specifically checking comments, seeing if something needs to be responded to. 99% of the time they're positive comments, but if there's a negative one, how you need to handle that. That regimen and that kind of structure is going to help you maintain your sanity and stay focused. And instead of being between meetings and, quickly trying to look at something and then, oh my gosh, I don't have time to respond to this now, so I got to do it later. It might add to that anxiety, right? So I love that piece of advice. Check at specific times throughout your day and be really intentional so that, again, you can manage social media and say social media does not manage you. Love that tip. And let's get into the rest of the interview with Megan Anthony. Welcome to the podcast, Megan Anthony.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here. I've wanted to have you on for so long, Megan. But I really appreciate you carving out the time because I know you're busy. For those
Yeah.
of our listeners that don't know who you are, why don't you just kind of share your background and how you got into school PR?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Megan Anthony. I'm the communications coordinator at the Clark County Educational Service Center in Springfield, Ohio. That's between Dayton and Columbus. And at the ESC, I actually work for a few different districts as a shared service. So I have 4 different districts that I'm serving this year in addition to the ESC. 3 of them are traditional K-12 school districts, and one of them is a career tech center.
Okay. So yeah, how'd you get into that? Because you wear a lot of hats. You're a little bit like Social School for EDU. I mean, we're managing social media for several different schools, but that's just social media. I mean, you're doing more than social media, so it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Um, Yes. So I took what I like to call one of the two traditional paths to school PR, which is the journalism track. I went to Ohio University where I majored in journalism. When I got out of school, I was looking for jobs. It was 2006, so not a great time to enter journalism, but I got lucky and I landed a job at a small weekly near Dayton, and I was hired as the education reporter. Education was not actually ever something I wanted to go into writing about. I actually I've been trying to get into sports writing, which I enjoyed. And if any of my ADs hear this, they're gonna be like, Megan wanted to be a sports writer. But um, so I kind of just took the job that I could get to get, my foot in and get some experience. And I just loved education. I loved writing about it. I loved the people. I loved being in classrooms. I even like the finance and the business side of things and the boring stuff. I just really loved it. So I stayed as an education writer. I moved to a couple different papers, but always stayed in education. Um, and then in 2011 and 2012, I started to struggle a lot with anxiety. And my work as a journalist was exacerbating that in a lot of ways. So I decided it was kind of time for me to leave journalism and start looking elsewhere. And about a year later, a superintendent that I had worked with for a few years contacted me. He had a position he was opening up at his district that would be a central office administrative assistant and communications person. And I got that job. And May of 2013, I started. I was with him for a couple of years until he went to the ESC as their new superintendent. I had kind of an idea for a while of offering sort of a shared service for districts because I had seen a lot of smaller rural districts where they couldn't really afford to have communications person on staff. And I just felt strongly that those smaller districts, those rural districts, and those districts that maybe couldn't afford a full time staff member really should have the ability to have someone assist them with those needs because they're so important for our school districts. And so he knew about that kind of thought that I had that idea and asked me if I'd be interested in trying it. And so we went to the ESC and started the communication service.
That's awesome. Great connection. And you said you took two of the paths. So you were the journalist route. Is the other route you were a teacher, or is that what other route do you usually see?
I see a lot of people who have like a traditional marketing and
Okay.
communications
Okay.
background. Um,
So
yeah,
I
so
would add a third then, probably a teacher. Not
yeah, teachers.
not a chemistry major. That's
No,
me.
not a lot of
So
chemistry majors.
who knew that I was going to be in social media? But Lord knows I love to talk. I love to tell stories. So I'm really glad I'm here. So just tell me a little bit about your specific role then with these four different schools that you serve through your ESC.
Yeah, so one of the things that after being in a couple years in my district as the central office secretary and communications, I was really tired of being chained to a desk. I don't like that at all. My husband will always joke that if you tell me, like, I'm happy to be anywhere I'm needed, but if you tell me to be there, I don't want to be there at all. I don't like to feel like I have to be someplace. So um, I was just kind of like, I was like, I need more variety. I need to be up and moving and doing more things. And boy, did I find it, because I am the communications coordinator for all of these districts, but that takes on sort of a different meaning at all of them because they all have unique needs. So at the district that I came from, which is still one that I work with, it's called Greenon. I'm pretty much I'm pretty much all hands on deck there for communications. And then I have some districts where it's a bit more of a partnership between the superintendent and the administrators and me. And then I have, somewhere it's really more of a consultancy. They kind of call me when they need me and they need a little less from
Okay.
me. So, it varies based on the needs of the district, which suits me really well because I like a lot of variety, and it just gives me that kind of every day is different feeling that I sort of missed.
Right. Now, do you do social media for all four of those districts or only a couple of them or what?
I do social media for 5 districts right now.
Okay. So,
Yes. So I have my ESC, which is a little less It's different because it's more marketing. Our clients and our audience are really our partner school
Okay.
districts. Um, and then I have Greenon Clark Shawnee, which is a traditional school district, Northeastern Local School District, which is a traditional school district, and then I have the Springfield Clark CTC, which is our career tech center.
Okay, awesome. Oh my goodness, we could probably talk for days on tips of, how to organize that all. I don't want to brush by, Megan. You talked about getting out of the journalism realm because of issues with anxiety. I have
Mm-hmm.
suffered from anxiety when I lost my job and was starting this business. I had debilitating anxiety, but I can't imagine that your role now is any less stressful than it was when you were a journalist. So how can you explain that to me a little bit or
I can. There were a couple of situations when I was a journalist where I was put into positions where I really didn't feel safe. I never feel safe in the role I'm in right now. I feel a lot of pressure, but I never feel like my safety might be at
okay.
risk. So that was the biggest part of it. It was really right after I started having kids, and it was kind of a little bit like, okay, I don't really want to be going to murder scenes at 10 p.m. anymore when I have a 1 year old. That's not working for me.
That
So even though I was the education reporter at smaller newspapers, everybody has to take those night shifts and those beats and things like that. So there were just some things that just really weren't in my realm of comfort. And so that was part of it. But, I think a lot of us in school communications struggle with anxiety. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, I know that sometimes when I'm anxious about things that you're a little bit like, okay, you got to chill out. But honestly, I think that really makes me good at my job because I think through all the possible kind of scenarios and reactions and what could happen and what could go wrong. And I think it really gives me um, a lot of ability to think of things differently than some of my colleagues do
yeah.
and to be responsive to the needs of the community and especially parents who have a lot of worries and concerns about their kids in school
Yeah.
sometimes.
That's good reflection and thanks for sharing. So what social media platforms, like the specific platforms are you responsible for those schools that you serve?
So I'm responsible for social media for all of them, and then right now the ESC only has
Okay.
Facebook. Renan, the CTC, Northeastern, and Clark Shawnee all have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Okay.
And the CTC started a TikTok account, and then there were some concerns about it, so we kind of haven't done anything with it for a while, but we're looking at it.
Okay, awesome. So those are the main ones that we kind of do, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just like right away, what are some like how do you stay organized with serving all of those and stay on top of the comments and all of that? Any quick tips for our listeners out there?
Yeah, it might seem like less intuitive, but honestly, I set times that I check comments and respond, and that's when I do it. Because otherwise, if I look at something between meetings, then it's going to get lost and I'm not going to remember to respond to it. If there's something that I can't answer right away, which happens to be a lot because I'm not really fully in any of these districts, so there's a lot of things that I don't know. I make sure to send my email to ask a question immediately so that when I get that reply, or hopefully get that reply, that it'll remind me to go answer that comment. And then I'm obsessed with planners and to-do lists and things like that. So I have a planner. I have an agenda which you can customize completely to from scratch. And so I have a little section on every day of my planner that says social media, and then it has the initials I use for each district where I write in what I'm doing that day on social media. And then I have a box right below it for comments/questions where I make notes if there's something I need to get back to.
Okay, so is you said Agendia? Is that like an app on your phone?
Agenda. No, it's right here. It's literally right here.
Oh,
It's like a
oh, awesome.
planner, like a paper planner. It goes everywhere with
And I'm
me.
a paper planner girl too, and you can see I got lots of scribbles and I'm taking notes now, but I love it. Okay, that's helpful. Now, Megan, years ago, our paths crossed. Can you tell me how you kind of got connected with Social School for EDU? Do you remember?
Yeah, so um so I really love podcasts, and I really love true crime podcast. But sometimes I felt like when I was on a way to a meeting and I had just like listened to about an awful murder or something, I was like, that's not really putting me in the right headspace. So I'm going to look. And I found some different podcasts that were out there that were kind of touching on school communications and things like that. And I started thinking like, well, there's got to be like other things. And I think I first heard you maybe on Purpose Land with Shane
Okay,
Haggerty.
maybe, yeah.
I think that might have been, but it was a podcast or something, and somebody like talked about it, and I was like, wow, it's like social media just for schools, which was really something I kind of needed help with. I find that social media is kind of the most anxiety inducing part of our jobs because it's right there for everybody to see and everybody to comment on. And so it just, I was always questioning myself. And this job, especially in my role where I'm working in so many districts, it can be really lonely to be the only person approaching things from a communications perspective sometimes, because everybody has their different roles. And, sometimes they don't understand the nuances of social media. So when you're saying like, I'm not sure if we should post this, or, what do you think of this photo? Should I be worried about this? And they're like, it's just a photo. Just put it out there. It's not a problem. But we know a little better than that. And I just really needed other people to talk through that with. I'm a social person too. I like to talk to people and relate to people and have other people who understand what I'm thinking and where I'm coming from. Like I think everybody in the world pretty much does. But so I just really was craving that connection with other people who were thinking about the things I was. So when I heard about Social School for EDU, I was like, that's exactly what I've been looking for and thinking that I needed.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And I'm glad. I love Shane, and Shane's from Ohio, so that's a
Mm-hmm.
great connection. And now you've been part of our membership community, and you've been through our boot camp, which we're getting ready to welcome in some new campers this summer.
Yes.
You've been such a star student too, and you share with others as well. But some of that ongoing PD that we provide, I think, is really awesome. And you recently helped out with some of that PD.
Yes. I did a skill session with you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I had asked you, and I'm always talking to people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we gotta like, this is awesome. And you're thinking, is it really awesome? Like, I just am doing my job. And I'm like, yes, we need to share this with people. So just tell me a little bit about that rebranding session because, and again, we have that on record. We record all of the trainings that we do in our membership group, and our members get access to everything. But, for our listeners now that may not be a part of that, can you share some of your key takeaways for that rebranding process that you went through with Greenon?
Yeah. So when I first arrived at Greenon in 2013, we were playing what I call Whack-A-Logo, which was basically there were so many different nights hanging around where the Greenon Nights. There were so many different nights. There were so many different logos in use. If you Googled like school night mascots and hit the images button on Google, I mean, I could circle like 7 on the first screen that were I had seen somewhere in the
Yeah,
district. Like we just didn't have.
well,
Yeah.
I just want to say whack a logo. Who listening right now could play whack a logo? I totally can with my little district in New Auburn. Everybody uses a different one. The PTO, the PTA, the volleyball team wants to use a different one. The basketball, the football. I mean, there's just so many, and the one we do use is the one that like everybody uses. So, anyways,
Yeah.
I can totally relate, and I bet our listeners
Yeah.
can too. It's so funny.
Yeah, so we were playing that game, and then our athletic department really started using. I call it the Georgia G. It looks like the Green Bay G too, but our colors are the same as I think it's the Georgia Bulldogs, and so I think it was like literally just lifted from the Georgia Bulldogs page at one point. But they started using that. It was never really board approved, and we never used it on the academic or the school side. We're a pretty small school district. We have about 15 to 1,600 kids. And our athletics are really integral to what we do and a huge part of our community's love for Greenon. So I really wanted us all on the same page, but I knew that wasn't the page we should be on. I knew that my board had not approved of it. I did not want a logo that, other people use, not just Georgia, but, there are really a lot of schools that use logos like that. I think we had one really close to us that used that same G, and I think there were 3 or 4 more in Ohio that we found that were using it too. So it was a nice logo. People loved it, but it just didn't say Greenon when you looked at it unless you were from here and familiar with that. So that's really where we wanted to go. And then we were fortunate enough to pass a bond issue with our community to build a new K through 12 campus. It's getting ready to open this fall. It's gorgeous. But when that happened, I went back to my board and I was like, we've been kind of talking around this for a while, and now we're going to be spending all this money, and there's going to be elements like logos in there. And I think that we should do the work now to, get something we really love for our logo and our visual brand so that we spend that money wisely in that building and it's not something we're unhappy with in a couple of years. So we went through that process. I love what we came up with. It is a shield with the letter G in it. We also have a version that has a knight behind it and a version that has a knight on a horse behind it. But the primary is that shield with the G.
And we'll link that branding guide that you guys came up with.
Yeah.
I have that link from your session, and I'll put that in the show notes for everybody so they can take a listen. You
Mm-hmm.
got community input on it, and you did something really cool, which was you actually had your students vote. Tell me about
Yes.
that.
So we did. There were some different conversations. We had a committee that had represented. We had some people who were just alumni, some people who were parents and alumni, just parents, coaches, teachers, me, all kinds of different people, a couple students, and but there was a lot of discussion about who should we get this final input from on what to choose. We were pretty set on that shield idea, but we had a few different options for it. And at one point, there were some people who thought, well, let's send it all to all of the people in our alumni, like in our alumni group. And some people who thought, let's send it to our 7 through 12. And I was like, let's do a community survey for everybody in the community, and let's do it K through 12. I think a lot of times in conversations, we kind of gravitate to those older kids because we feel a little bit more comfortable with their ability to understand everything. But, my son was in kindergarten at the time. He was thrilled to be able to do it. He and his friends thought it was so cool. And they can look at 5 pictures and tell you which one they like the best. We just had a printed survey, and their teacher showed them all the options. They had all the options there, and they just circled the one they liked. And then the older kids took it online.
Okay. And did they end up picking the one that you thought they were going to pick, or?
No, we had one that was it was pretty modern, and we had one that I think it was more modern than anything we'd used in the past, but it was a little more traditional. And I thought that the kids might like the more modern one, and they ended up picking um the more traditional one. Although what's weird is that my own kids, I expected them to pick the more traditional one, and they picked the more modern one, which surprised me. But
Well, you don't know until you ask. And for me,
yeah.
who I am not visually impaired, all of the awesome graphics that happen with Social School for EDU are all my graphic designer.
Hmm.
So I don't know how to create something, but I do know what I like and what I don't like when I see it. So you were able to give them, like you said, those 5 options, and
Yeah.
they could tell you,
Yeah.
even a kindergarten a child could tell you which one they liked.
Hmm.
So that's awesome. And then overall, were people happy with it?
There were some people who had really strong emotional attachments to that G with the circle. What was kind of funny to me about it was I would have a lot of people refer to it as like the classic or traditional G, but I'd be like, that's only been around for a few years. So I think that people just, they really liked it. And one of the interesting things that came out in our survey was that there wasn't very much agreement on what our real logo was or even what our colors were. There were some people who say red's in there and some people who say red isn't in there. But I think it's gone really well since then. I think we did a good job with rolling it out. Our spiritware has looked really good. We have a process to make sure that the correct logo is used on everything, and it's all worked out really well, and I think people are happy with it
That's good. Yeah, because there are going to be people that are like, no, this is always our logo. And I just thought it was interesting when you were sharing too. It's like some people are like, just ask the alumni. It's like, well, they're like gone. Like this is like the new school. This is, for our students and our staff and our community. It shouldn't all just weigh in alumni because like you're not an alumni, but
now. Hmm.
but your kids go to school there, so you're definitely tied in and you work there.
Yeah. And those were definitely some conversations we had. And, I think from a communications perspective, one of the most important things that we can do is really keep reminding people that our world is a little bigger than we sometimes tend to think when we are in that school mindset, because we're thinking the kids and teachers first, the people who are there with us every day. But then we also have the parents, and then you have the community, and then you have the alumni who don't live nearby, but they still have emotional attachment to your district. So just reminding people that, one, we can't know what everybody thinks because we ask one alumni. That can't represent everybody. And also that there's value in having those different voices.
Yeah. Now, how long did this process take you from beginning to end?
It was a pretty long process. It took about a year. We were only meeting like once a month, though. You definitely could have done it quicker.
Okay.
Um, and I think, if you had a different approach to it in terms of how much community input and how much community involvement on the committee you wanted, you could maybe do it quicker. And um, depending on how much emotional attachment there is to
Okay.
the current branding that you're using, I really felt strongly that we needed to, start from the beginning, make our case for why we were making the changes, and bring people along on that journey with us.
Yeah. And then did you have a professional graphic designer helping you with those options?
Sort of. We had Jostens, which I think in Ohio, definitely everybody knows them. They do like class rings and graduation announcements and yearbooks and things like that. And we used their graphic designer, and they had a consultant who, he's our representative from them, and he worked with me and helped with the committee and everything too.
Okay. But you can't really do it on your own. And I don't think that even having a student who even might be gifted in graphic design, I think having somebody that has done logos before would really be critical.
Yeah, I am an okay. I can take all the pieces and put them together in a way that looks okay, but I cannot draw anything from scratch. And I think that is a skill that I feel like sometimes people forget that it's not something everybody has. Like, just because I can make something that looks nice in a graphic, that doesn't mean that I can go from scratch and draw you a horse on the computer. So yes, I would say that that's pretty important. I've heard of districts, and we had some conversations about the possibility of having a student help and things like that. Um, but it just wasn't the path for us.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So let's get back to social media. And what are some unique ways that you've really used social media to drive up the engagement in your district, getting people involved? Because that's a hard part. And we're still coming out of this pandemic, right? And there's getting some comfort level with some things, but like we want to get people back engaged. What are some things that have been successful for you?
So one of the things that's been really helpful for me this year is that I have a parent who, her son's a senior. He's very involved in sports. She's very involved in the community and very generous, and she's a fantastic photographer. And she does a lot of the sports photos. She'll take headshots of all the kids, and she'll let me use them. So we've been able to do a lot using individual photos of kids where we just don't have the same ability to show the kids with masks on. And sometimes those mask photos, and not that I think they don't have value, because I think they do, because that's the reality we're in right now. But sometimes they were distracting from our message because people were getting maybe a little caught up on the masks. Still. So we've been able to really highlight our students, which does really great for us, again, as a really small community. Right now in two of my districts, actually three of my districts, I have building projects going on. That always gets a lot of
Yes.
attention. So we have updates on those, and we've been able to share that progress.
How often are you sharing updates?
We do at least monthly at the beginning. Right now, I have moved my two districts that are opening buildings next fall. We have moved to an every 2 weeks to every 3 weeks. And what I'm doing with them is filming several short videos about a specific thing in the building, and then we share those out.
Okay. So great. Because that behind the scenes progress, even though it doesn't seem like a lot's happening. And people, if they've invested their tax dollars, right, into the school, they want to be able to see that progress. So I think that's really important.
Yes.
Awesome. And then you have the Knights takeover. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's our Instagram takeover. And we did it a few times in the fall really successfully, and we're hoping to do it again this spring a little bit. But it's just having our students take over for the day. That's I know that you've done a lot of conversations on Instagram takeover, and I had heard all those and listened to all those. And I went to my admin team. I was like, I think we should do this. And they
And
were like,
you,
how does that work? And I was like, we just give them the password for the day. And I'm sure they were like,
their anxiety started
uh,
going up, and their anxiety is like, oh my God.
yeah. But they trusted me, and they were like, okay, if you think it's right, we'll do it. And I'm like, thank you. It's going to be. And I remember at this small district where my kids are and where I worked for I know a lot of the families, I know a lot of the kids really well. So I handpicked my first couple, and I was like, I know these kids can do a good job. And the first one, his name is Trent. I was like, I want you to do it. Can you do it? And he's like, yeah. And I was so nervous that day. I gave him everything. I'm like, are you good? Like and when that first post he sent came out, I was like, yes, it's perfect. I remember taking a screenshot and sending it to my admin team. I was like, look, I did such a good job. And it's even more stressful in a pandemic, I think, because I was like telling him, like, you've got to make sure everybody is wearing a mask. You've got to make sure people are socially distanced. This was even at the beginning of the pandemic in the fall. So it was scary, but they did a great job, and they loved the chance to share their day with the community. And the community really loved seeing those kids and seeing things from their
Was it
perspective.
through,
So
yeah, was it through Instagram stories or was it just through posts on the page?
they were allowed to do both.
Okay.
I gave them a lot of freedom. Something my people will always hear me saying is I'll be like, well, on Instagram, and I'm like, ask a kid. They know so much more than me about social media. Just ask one of them. I know every one of those kids knew more about social media than me about how to use it and like what they as students like to see. And so, I was like, you can use stories, you can use posts. You can take videos if that's what you want. Just make sure you're being careful. Like I said, we picked kids that we knew would do a good job. We started off first thing in the morning. There was a post that had a photo of them and said, like, Nights Takeover. It's Brandy's day, and she'll be sharing her day with you. And built it up so that I think they felt that there was a lot of faith in them to do a good job.
Yeah.
And then they rose to that occasion.
And it must have increased your followers from your students.
Yes. Yeah, the students were especially excited to see it. I think on Instagram it was very
Yeah,
popular with them.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Okay, our time's gone so fast, Megan, and it
I know.
always does. But what would you say is your best social media tip for our listeners out there?
So my best social media tip is kind of my best tip in life, and it's from this podcast I really enjoy called The Lazy Genius, and it is Be a Lazy Genius. And what that means, it's Kendra Adachi. She has a book too. This really speaks to my anxious perfectionist soul, but it's be a genius about the things that matter and lazy about the things that don't. And I love that because there are so many things that you can do quickly. Throwback Thursday is one we always talk about. You can batch those out in an hour and have them done for a month. That really frees you up to spend your time on those things that matter and that really need your attention. We are all stretched so thin, not just in education in general, but especially in school communications. I feel like a lot of us are in one person departments. I like to joke that I'm a 25% department because I work for so many districts. But so just focusing on what matters and using those things that you can quickly do to fill in the gaps to really give you the space to put your attention where it needs to
I
be.
love it. And I compare it to also to like, your most important tasks I like to do in the beginning of the day because that's when my creativity is the best and I'm the freshest. And then the
Yeah.
stuff that I can do with potentially a glass of wine if my kids are like doing their own thing and my husband wants to watch, American Pickers or something, like I can do Throwback Thursdays while I'm sipping a glass of wine. It's all good.
I've been known to have my laptop out at the soccer field during practice doing stuff. So
Yes. Yeah. I was working in the car the other day because of COVID. I couldn't go in and watch my daughter's little basketball camp. So I was just outside, working away. This has been such a great conversation, Megan. I appreciate you. And I know I'm going to have you back too, because I know that you have a lot more to share with all the tips and tricks that you have with all of the schools you serve. We're going to make sure to give links to the different channels that you are responsible for all of those schools, because I think that'll be helpful. What is the best way for our listeners to stay connected to you?
I'm on Twitter at Megan Anthony PR, and I am sporadic. Like sometimes I'll be there tweeting out nonsense for a while, and then I'll just disappear for a while. But you can always email me at megan.anthony@clarkesc.org if I can help with anything.
Okay, so I'll make sure to link the Twitter handle and the email in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Megan, for being here.
Thank you for
I
having me.
appreciate your time and have a great day. And everybody, thanks so much for listening. Remember, we drop a new episode every single Monday. And you guys, if you haven't left a review for this podcast yet, I would love to get one. It helps get the word out and help more schools across the country. So we will see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.